May 17th, 1968. Georgetown, Kentucky. A man walks along a quiet rural road, searching for glass bottles to resell. But what he finds isn't trash, it's a tightly wrapped green canvas bundle. Inside is a young girl's body. Naked, decomposed, no name, no ID, no missing persons report. She was just gone. For years, police couldn't match her to anyone. No leads, no family, no answers. Just a haunting grave-marked tent girl. But decades later, an ordinary man, not a cop, not a detective, refuses to let her stay forgotten. He starts digging, asking questions. What he finds will change everything. Who was she? Why was she dumped like garbage? And why did no one come looking? This is not fiction. It's a true story, and her name deserves to be remembered. Subscribe to @Unbelievable True Story and watch to the end. May 17th, 1968. Scott County, Kentucky. It started like any normal morning. Wilbur Riddle, a 36-year-old employee at a nearby electrical company, was walking along US Route 25. The sun was out, the breeze gentle. He was scanning the ground for empty soda bottles, a way to make a few extra bucks on the side. He never expected to find something that would change the course of his life and haunt his thoughts for decades. Near a ditch on the edge of the road, something caught his eye. A bundle, oddly shaped, wrapped in what looked like an old tent or military canvas. Curious, Wilbur stepped closer. The canvas looked tight, too tight. As he leaned in, a smell hit him. It wasn't just mildew or decay. It was rot, human rot. His breath caught. He knelt down, pulled back a corner of the canvas, and screamed. Inside was the body of a young woman, badly decomposed, her features bloated and distorted by time and heat. She was naked, curled up almost like a child. The tent canvas was her only covering. It wasn't a burial. It was a dump site. Wilbur ran to the nearest phone and called the police. What followed would become one of the strangest, most frustrating cold cases in American history. Police garlight when authorities arrived. They worked quickly to recover the remains. The body was sent to the state medical examiner. The girl was estimated to be between 16 and 25 years old. She had reddish-brown hair, a noticeable gap between her front teeth, and stood about 5 feet 1 inch tall, weighing around 110 pounds. But that was all they had. No ID, no jewelry, no identifying marks or clothing. She had clearly been dead for weeks, maybe longer, and no one had reported her missing. She was entered into the system as a Jane Doe, eventually nicknamed Tent Girl by investigators. Because of the material she was found wrapped in, the police did what they could. They checked missing persons reports across Kentucky. They even expanded their search to nearby states, Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana. Nothing. Dozens of calls came in. Parents of runaways, friends of missing women. But one by one, they were ruled out. The face didn't match. The age was wrong. The height off. Forensics in 1968 couldn't tell them much. There was no DNA testing, no facial reconstruction, no national database. The only hope was a tip that never came to SO in 1971. 3 years later, she was buried in Georgetown Cemetery. A small headstone marked her resting place. Tent Girl, found May 17, 1968, on US Highway 25. Died about April 26 to May 3, 1968. Age about 16 to 19 years. Height 5 feet 1 inch. Weight 110 to 115 pounds. Reddish brown hair. Unidentified. The grave was donated by a local funeral home. Some residents left flowers, but no family came. Who was this girl? Why had no one searched for her? And who had? Wrapped her in canvas and dumped her like waste? Crossmark years passed. Then decades. But the story doesn't end there, because in the early 1990s, long after the case had gone cold, a young man in Tennessee came across a strange family connection. His name was Todd Matthews, and he had just married the daughter of Wilbur Riddle. Yes, the very man who had found Tent Girl's body 20 years earlier. At first, it was just a curiosity. Todd asked about the case. Wilbur told him what he remembered: the body, the smell, the endless questions, the sadness of a girl with no name. But for Todd, it didn't end at curiosity. Something gnawed at him. Who was this girl? Why was she never identified? Why hadn't someone solved this? Most people would have let it go. But Todd couldn't. He didn't work in law enforcement. He had no training, but he had something else: obsession and time. Pager in the early days of the internet. Long before Facebook or Google, Todd logged on to primitive message boards and online missing persons listings. He started searching obsessively. He joined early forums like alt.truecrime. He emailed coroners and police departments. He read every post about missing girls from the 1960s. He even started his own website, tintgirl.com. Late into the night, he'd scroll through blurry photos and grainy police sketches, looking for someone, anyone. And in 1998, almost 30 years after Tint Girl was found, he discovered a post that it was from a woman named Rosemary Westbrook. She had been searching for her missing sister. The post read, "My sister, Barbara Ann Hackmann, disappeared in 1967 from Lexington, Kentucky. She was 24 years old, had reddish hair, and a gap between her front teeth." Todd froze. That description, the teeth, the hair, the date, it all lined up. Could it be? Todd Matthews couldn't breathe. The post, the details, the timing that a woman named Rosemary Westbrook was searching for her missing sister, a young mother named Barbara Ann Hackmann Taylor, who vanished in 1967, just 1 year before Tint Girl was found. Barbara was 24, had reddish-brown hair, and a gap between her teeth, just like the Jane Doe buried under the Tint Girl marker in Georgetown, Kentucky. Todd read the post again and again. His hands were shaking. Could this really be her? Todd reached out immediately. He wrote to Rosemary, sharing everything he knew: the discovery, the location, the tent canvas, the date she was found. Rosemary responded with a detail that chilled Todd. Barbara had been living in Lexington, Kentucky, with her husband and 2 children when she disappeared. That was just 20 miles from where Tint Girl was found. The pieces were coming together. But it still wasn't proof. Todd knew what he had to do next. He needed DNA. DNA, but this was 1998. DNA testing wasn't like it is now. It was expensive, slow, and not widely used in cold cases, especially those decades old. Still, Todd pressed on. He reached out to the Scott County coroner, to the Kentucky State Police, and to every department that had ever touched the Tint Girl case that he begged them to re-examine the remains. And finally, after months of persistence, the authorities agreed to exhume the body from the grave marked Tint Girl. The process wasn't easy. Years underground had caused degradation, but they were able to recover tooth fragments and bone samples. Now, all they needed was a DNA comparison. Rosemary and other family members of Barbara Hackmann Taylor provided samples, and in April of 1998, the results came back. White heavy check mark, it was a match. Tint Girl had a name. After 30 years of silence, she was finally identified as Barbara Ann Hackmann Taylor, the girl with no name. The body no one claimed. The mystery haunting an entire town. She had always been real, and someone had always loved her. Woman standing. So who was Barbara? Born in Illinois in 1943, Barbara Hackmann had grown up in a modest family. She married young to a man named George Earl Taylor and had 2 small daughters. By the time she was 24, she had moved to Lexington, Kentucky. Her husband, Earl, was a carnival worker, often traveling, sometimes for weeks at a time. Neighbors recalled Barbara as quiet but kind. She loved her daughters. But then, she was gone. Earl told neighbors and family that she had just walked out, left him, abandoned the kids. That was it.no missing persons report. No police investigation. Just silence. That silence lasted for 3 decades, until Todd Matthews, a man with no badge, no training, and no reason to care, changed everything. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story, because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. Now that Barbara's identity was confirmed, a new question haunted everyone. Who killed her? Police turned their attention to one man, her husband, George Earl Taylor. Let's go back to what he said in 1967. According to his version of events, Barbara left him, took off, walked out. No note. He never heard from her again. That's the story he told to her family. That's the story he told to friends. But that was never confirmed by anyone else. That he never reported her missing. He never called the police. And strangely, he left Kentucky soon after he relocated. remarried, and never mentioned Barbara again. Todd Matthews and many who followed the case. This wasn't just suspicious. It was damning. But there was a problem. By the time Barbara's identity was confirmed in 1998, Earl Taylor had already passed away. He died in the 1980s, taking his secrets, and possibly his guilt, to the grave. Police couldn't charge a dead man, and they had no forensic evidence linking him directly to the crime. No fingerprints, no murder weapon, no confession, just a body wrapped in a tent, a missing wife, and a husband who never looked for her. Officially, the case remained open, but unsolved. Unofficially, most believed the answer was clear: broken heart. But what about Barbara's children? In the years after her disappearance, her daughters were told different stories. Some believed their mother had died in an accident. Others were told she had abandoned them. They grew up never knowing the truth. Until one day, they saw her face again. On the news. On missing persons forums. On a website called tintgirl.com. That's how they learned what really happened to their mother. Not from family, not from police, but from a stranger on the internet, who refused to let her stay forgotten. Laptop computer Todd Matthews would go on to become a pioneer in missing persons advocacy. He co-founded the DOE Network, a volunteer organization dedicated to matching unidentified remains with missing people. He later worked with the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NMUS, helping families find the answers that eluded them for years. And it all started because he couldn't forget the name on a grave. Tint Girl. Repeat button. This is not fiction. Every detail is part of a real case that you can verify yourself. But even with a name, even with the truth, the pain never fully healed. Barbara was robbed of decades. Her daughters grew up without her, and the man who likely took her life faced no justice. Today, her grave has been updated. The marker now reads, Barbara Ann Hackmann Taylor. 1937, 1968, Tint Girl. Identified 1998, loved and remembered. She's no longer a mystery, but the echo of her story lingers. A girl left in a ditch. A case nearly forgotten, and one man's refusal to stop searching. For decades, the world forgot about Barbara Ann Hackmann Taylor. She was just a cold case, just another Jane Doe. But once her identity was confirmed in 1998, something bigger began to stir. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all the unnamed, all the bodies buried under numbers, not names, all the missing people whose stories had ended without answers. And suddenly, there was hope. Satellite antenna. The internet had become a tool of justice. Todd Matthews' journey wasn't just about solving one case. It became a blueprint. In 1999, Todd launched the DOE Network, a website that gathered hundreds, eventually thousands, of unidentified body cases and missing persons reports. Before that, there was no central place to compare them. Police databases didn't talk to each other. Cases from one state weren't cross-referenced with another. But Todd, he saw the missing pieces. Literally, he created detailed entries with sketches, composite images, dental records, and approximate ages. Then he posted them online, hoping someone, somewhere, might recognize something. And people responded. Adult laptop computer, teachers, woman scientist, nurses, older adult retirees, family members who had never stopped looking. They joined the DOE Network. They started looking too. Some cases that had gone cold for 40 or 50 years were finally matched. All because one man, with no badge, no lab, no paycheck, refused to give up. Laptop computer. But Todd didn't stop there. He later joined the U.S. Department of Justice to help launch NMUS, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, a government-backed database that worked across state lines. NMUS became the first federally funded program that linked missing persons with unidentified remains. Police departments, coroners, and ordinary citizens could now access the same powerful tools. Suddenly, families didn't need to wait for a miracle. They could go online and look for themselves, and many did. Woman standing. But what about Barbara's family? When her daughters learned the truth, it hit them like a wave. They had spent decades wondering, grieving, trying to fill in the blanks. Some believed she had left them. Some were told she had died in an accident. But none had known what really happened. Now, they had clarity, but it came with pain. Their mother didn't abandon them. She was taken, hidden, and for 30 years, no one even knew her name. Barbara's youngest daughter, who was just a baby when she vanished, would later say, "Knowing hurts, but not knowing hurts worse." They visited her grave, touched her name, left flowers and notes, and finally, they were able to say goodbye. This is not fiction. Every detail is part of a real case that you can verify yourself. Brain, so what happened to Barbara? Facts we do know are chilling. She was 24 years old, a mother of two that she lived in Lexington, Kentucky. Her husband was Earl George Taylor, a carnival worker. She was last seen alive in late 1967. Her body was found in May 1968, wrapped in a canvas, the kind used in carnival tents. She was never reported missing. Her husband never spoke of her again. After her identity was confirmed, police attempted to reopen the case, but it was too late. There was no physical evidence left to test. The body had decomposed. The canvas had long since been destroyed, and the main suspect? Dead for over a decade. But most investigators, and Barbara's own family, believe the truth is clear. She was murdered, likely by her husband, then dumped in a ditch, covered in canvas from his carnival job, as if trying to bury both her and the crime in one act. And it almost worked if it weren't for that one line on a gravestone. And a man who wouldn't stop searching. She might still be Tent Girl today. Round Pushpin today. The stretch of Highway 25 near Georgetown, Kentucky, looks like any other road. Cars hum past. Wind blows through the trees. Nothing seems unusual, but just a few feet off the shoulder, in the thick brush, was where Barbara's story almost ended. No witnesses, no camera footage, no justice. Just silence. Brain, let's pause. What does it mean when a person disappears and no one reports it? How many more are out there? Still missing, still unnamed, still buried under Jane Doe or John Doe? What happens when a system forgets people? Todd Matthews asked these questions, and he didn't wait for someone else to answer. He became the answer. Crying face for Barbara. The tragedy wasn't just the murdered, it was the absence that followed. The silence, the forgotten name, the decades of not knowing. Her family had no closure. Her children had no answers, and her body was nearly erased. But thanks to one man's relentless determination, she was remembered, identified, claimed, loved. And that is where the story transforms. Candle in 2011, a memorial service was held in Barbara's honor. People gathered at her grave. Some came from across the country. Some didn't even know her, but felt connected through the story. Todd was there too. He spoke softly, emotionally. He placed fresh flowers on the grave, and he whispered, "You were never forgotten, you just hadn't been found yet." In that moment, it wasn't just about Barbara. It was about all of them. The unnamed, the discarded, the lost. Her grave had once read, "Tent Girl, known only to God." Now it reads, Barbara Ann Hackmann Taylor. 1937, 1968, the Tent Girl, identified 1998, the loved and remembered. A foggy Kentucky highway, trees leaning in. A quiet ditch. For 30 years, no one noticed. No one stopped. The world moved on. But one man, a stranger with no reason to care, read a single line on a gravestone, and he couldn't let go. That he searched for months, then years, then decades, until one day, in the blur of internet forums and lost hope, he found her. Not a Jane Doe, not just Tent Girl, but a daughter, a mother, a sister, Barbara. This is a real story. Every detail you've heard is part of a documented case. You can verify it yourself. Have you heard this story before? Would you have looked twice at a name like Tent Girl? How many more are still out there, waiting for someone like Todd Matthews? Movie Camera, if you're drawn to real stories that stay with you. Subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story, because every week, we reveal the darkest truths hidden in plain sight. Backhand index pointing right. Watch the next video on your screen, or dive into our full playlist of real mysteries and crimes. The next story might be even more shocking.